So yesterday I posted a little example of using Chronulus and Zapier. I'd never used Zapier before this weekend, and so this is my first attempt to do that. What you can see here on the right hand side, this is a Zapier workflow. They call it a Zap. Basically the goal of the workflow is to take a pitch deck, or a pitch, could be any sort of pitch document as long as it's in PDF form. The goal here is to basically email that to a workflow. A lot of times you'll have this type of workflow when you're emailing in a receipt or something like that to, let's say, QuickBooks or to your accounting department. Here I'm just using that as a way to screen a pitch deck. You could use the same type of workflow to screen really any type of document. Could be a resume for a job description, really anything that you want to score or get a prediction back on, and some analysis on that particular document. So let me kind of walk through. I'll give you the overview of what's going on here in the workflow first, and then I'll maybe go into each of the steps, and then finally get into the code where I actually implement the Chronulus binary predictor. So the first step in this is getting the inbound email. So this first step is just a Zapier email node. Then what I've done is I've set up a couple different paths to take. So depending on whether there's a PDF attached or not, there's two choices. Yes, there is a PDF attached, and you kind of go down this route where we send an acknowledgement email. Yes, we've received your PDF, and then we analyze the content of the email. So I don't really have to do this here, but I can get into the examples of what's actually in there in this particular AI step. The next step after that is a Chronulus binary predictor function. So this is a Zapier function, just a Python function. You can kind of write whatever you want in freeform in this. It's really easy to implement Chronulus agents in that form. Then after we get the output from the agent, there's a couple more paths we can take. One, did the user limit get exceeded? So in this workflow, I'm only allowing you to submit up to five documents per email, just to kind of limit the overall cost if a lot of people end up using this. So if the user limit is exceeded, you'll go this route and you'll say, hey, the user limit's exceeded, and you'll just receive an email based off of that saying, hey, we couldn't actually process your document because you've already used all of your credits, basically. If it hasn't been exceeded, then you'll get back a prediction response, and the prediction response is just a form email with the output that's been collected from the Chronulus agent. So that's kind of the overview of how the workflow is actually constructed. We can dig in a little bit deeper here. For example, on the path conditions, you can come in and look at that. And really what you're doing in that path condition is you're attaching some custom rules that looks for this attachment field. It says, does it exist? Yes. And we also have a file pointer that ends in PDF. So those are the conditions, very simple conditions I'm using to switch the direction of the workflow from one way to the other. The next step, there's multiple different types of nodes that you can use to send emails. There's actually a built-in Zapier email, but it's only limited, like 10 emails per day per user, so it'd be really easy to hit that if a lot of people started using this. So I've really just implemented here an Amazon simple email service node, which is a pretty easy way to send emails in larger quantities, as long as you have that service enabled in one of your Amazon accounts. So here I have that linked up to basically an Amazon account that I've already enabled for Chronulus, and that's a pretty easy way to just send emails directly from Zaps. Kind of look at that. So here is just a form email. I've written it out here in HTML, and then we can set whatever sender address as long as that's authenticated through our Amazon account. And here you get the from email. Whichever email sent the email to the pipeline itself is what's going to get the response from this particular node. Zooming in, so I did use an AI step here. I thought it might be nice to pull out, analyze some information from the email itself that was forwarded. Here I've set up Claude Sonnet to basically pull in input fields from the subject, from the body, and then just the attachment name. I'm not actually having it analyze the contents of the PDF. I just didn't want it to do that. I don't think people want their pitches to be actually sent out to Claude, so I'm not enabling that. But what it is doing here is just sort of pulling in a company name if it can find that within the subject or the attachment name or the body. And if it can't find it, it's basically just going to go blank. And also a company overview or company summary. And those can get fed through to later steps. I don't actually end up using the company overview in the Python code that you see after this, but I do use the company name if it's provided. So that's the AI step that I used ahead of time just to kind of extract it. You can obviously do a lot more with this depending on your workflow. The next step is the Chronulus Agent. So for this, I pull in the company name, the attachment, and the from field. The from field, I don't actually give our agent your email address. What I do is actually, within the Python code, I'm basically logging out to a database how many times you've used the agent. So that's how I utilize the email address here, because you don't necessarily have to have an account to use this particular workflow. Final step here is just looking at the conditions. So the output from this Chronulus Python function, you get a use count. So I'm looking up in the database how many times you've actually used the email or used the workflow, and I look to see if it's a number less than 6, right? So 5 is the limit. And then finally, you get a choice of responses. So on the positive side, the one that's more interesting, we get back a regret prediction for whether you'd regret turning down the investment or not. So here, get the output in different formats. So within the Python function, I've created sort of a % format or a raw probability format. I've also returned some other metadata that I use throughout the explanation to discuss, how we're actually coming about that estimate for you. And so I give back some parameters for the beta distribution that we estimate and discuss how that's used. And then finally at the end, I print out the full explanation from our agent so you can see what that raw explanation looks like. Within the actual Python code, you could have, pulled apart whatever type of explanation you wanted. That's actually, represented as a JSON object so that you could have stored that or used that down the road for whatever you liked instead of just printing it out in raw text. So that's the overview. The important pieces here, if you've never used Zapier before like me, it took me a little bit to understand how to pass data through from each individual step. So this particular Zapier function is linked here in the setup. It's a call to a function, and then you define what function you're triggering here. So here I have a function called regret prediction, and I'm just going to say, hey, this is actually the function I want to call. And that the code and everything for that is stored in a separate area of the site. So it's referencing this function that I've created earlier. So this is what that function actually looks like. So if you explore it, you get the main Python code. This is what's called when the function is executed. And you also get this trigger definition. So this is where you define in your function which inputs and outputs are flowing into the function and can be expected to flow out of the function. So here I'm using the company name that's pulled in from the AI node previously. I'm also pulling in the PDF attachment and the user email. The output from this is then defined below, so the functions later on are basically expecting the output here that I define. These dummy variables or the dummy outputs are what I'm giving here, but when we actually call the function, it's going to fill these in and use that same format, that same model. So that's how you define the inputs and outputs from your function. The main code defines the logic. There's a little bit more going on here just because I'm actually looking up a a use count as well from an external database. But if you kind of ignore that part of it, the main piece of this is defining the context for what you're trying to predict. So the context here is the startup context, right? What you're trying to pitch. Here I only have two variables that I'm giving to Chronulus. One is the company name, and the other is the PDF attachment. So this defines the input that flows into Chronulus. Then here you can see that my output data model that I'm gonna put back outside of or return from the Chronulus node here is defined below. And I have some default values set here. You can just use JSON or Python dictionaries to define these as well. I kind of prefer to use Pydantic data models to make this a little bit more robust and consistent throughout my coding. So that's what I'm doing here. So using this startup context, the inputs, basically I check to see if there's a use count, if the use count limit has been exceeded. If you're still within your usage, then it's going to continue on. And what it's going to do is it's going to set up a Chronulus session. The overall task here, let me kind of get rid of this side window so you can see it. The task here is please estimate the probability that the startup described in the provided inputs will be so successful that it'll come to regret turning down the opportunity to invest in it now. So that's the task that Chronulus is going to solve for you. You can obviously modify that. If you're a VC and you're actually wanting to use this, you could go in and you can modify the task and maybe give it more preferences around what your actual thesis is, what types of startups you're trying to target, what sort of check sizes you're looking for, many different aspects of the terms and things like that you might want to consider as you're screening actual companies for your investment. So that's the idea. This is the session. Once you have the session, you can feed the startup context to that session and create an agent. So that's what we've done here. The last piece of this, so how Zapier works, is that when you upload an attachment, it actually kind of caches that attachment and gives you a URL that you can call to pull in that attachment. So that's what I'm doing here in that PDF attachment input. It's actually just a URL string. So I'm using the request package here to go out and fetch that PDF, and then I'm encoding that in a string format to pass to Chronulus. So here I'm filling in that startup context. I've pulled in the PDF format or the PDF base64 encoded format of that PDF, and I'm going to feed that into the actual data object that gets fed to Chronulus. So that's here. You're getting the prediction queued up. I'm going to ask for the responses from 5 experts. So basically Chronulus is taking the output of those experts and forming a consensus prediction for you based off of those opinions from the experts. So that request is going to get set off, queued up in our system, and then the next line of this is basically just going to be polling, repeatedly going out and checking to see if that prediction is finished. So that's what polling means, and it's just going to test that every 5 seconds to see if it's ready. When it's finally ready, it's going to pull that prediction set back, and that's the prediction set is the object where all of the underlying opinions are, the text opinions, the actual numeric predictions from each of the opinions, and the final consensus over those. So at this point, you have a final prediction from Chronulus. I'm going to write back to the Dynamo database table where I'm tracking this, and basically say, hey, the users used one document. I have this table called Screen My Pitch Emails, and so it's just going to write the user email and the timestamp for when they have used the workflow. And then here I'm going to return the output from the Chronulus agent in the format that we already defined. So I have the different probability formats, alpha and beta formats, the full text description, which you'll see, and then I'm just going to take the use count that we found at the very top and add 1 to it, because we know that there's one more use to be added to this for the current user. The rest of these are just, there's lots of other sort of error handlings and control functions you could add here, and in order to basically get data passed through, you need to handle those and return some type of data from the Zapier function in all of those different cases. I've handled a few of them here, but for a robust prediction case or workflow case, I would want to go in and add even more outputs and error handling to make this a lot more robust. But I think this is a pretty decent example of walking through actually using the Chronulus agent within a workflow and just seeing how it works, being able to test it with some simple use cases for yourself. So I've posted the source code for this in our Chronulus examples GitHub repo, so you can go and look at that, modify it, do what we like to maybe use it in your own Zapier workflow. So what does this kind of all look like at the end? So you can see in the workflow we have this acknowledgement email. If you go down the correct path, you have an acknowledgement email. You can see that email in the top left-hand corner here. So it comes from this pitch predictor email address. That's just that's not an actual address that exists, but we're allowed to send from that because our whole domain is authorized through AWS. So I just say, hey, send the user an email from this email address. They'll understand what it's about. So there's a little note from me in this, thanking you for using the pitch predictor, and basically saying, hey, we started to process your document. And then as it moves forward, it's going to go through the rest of the process that I just showed you, and then at the very end you'll get back the prediction response. And this is an example of a prediction response that I generated earlier. My particular pitch document for Chronulus is kind of outdated, and it doesn't have a lot of the information that I would want to update in it now. So this is a nice example of getting a score back and being like, oh, it's only scoring us a 30% chance of like success, or like maybe like a 30% chance odds that we're gonna get funded by a particular investor, right? But there's an interesting aspect to this too, that there's maybe not specific language about the type of investor or the type of portfolio company the investor is targeting within that particular task that we're providing to Chronulus. And also my pitch document is just outdated and needs better content. So both of those things we can kind of work on. In the email you'll get back the prediction for the deck, and then just a walkthrough of what's actually, how that prediction was formed, the underlying beta distribution, and then the expert opinions below. So here you can see there's output from the 1 through 5 experts that we looked at for that. So you can look through and you can see the actual probability that each expert put on the chance of funding, basically, and look at the positive and negative framing. So Chronulus is going to look at both the positive and negative framing, what are the chances that you regret and what are the chances that you won't regret, answer both of those and combine those back in to get you a result that's less biased than you would have gotten otherwise. So that's kind of a quick overview of how you could set this up in Zapier. Obviously, once you're done with this, you can hit publish, and then your whole workflow will go live. You can define the actual email address at the beginning, obviously at the front here. You can change the name of the email address. It's always going to have this stuff at zapiermail.com at the end. I haven't actually found a way to customize that and put my own domain, but if you know of a way, if you're better at Zapier than I am, you can definitely do that as well. So thanks for watching.